What's up, everybody? DisThunder here. We're going to do another Mezco 112 collective review today, and it's going to be Spider-Gwen slash Ghost Spider slash Spider-Woman slash Gwen Stacy. God dang, girl's got some names. And as a character, this is not something I'm super familiar with, if I'm going to be honest. I do know she first appeared in Edge of Spider-Verse, which would have been back in 2014. Obviously, Gwen Stacy, the character, goes back much further with her very important comic book death in 1973 during the initial Amazing Spider-Man run. Well, I think as a concept, the character is a fun idea, and she has definitely one of the best costumes in comic books. Beyond being just a multiverse character, she's not got a major pull for me, but getting back to those visuals, there's really no denying that she is a striking character. Obviously, she went from her somewhat humble beginnings in 2014, 2015 to being a central character in the Sony Spider-Verse films, which the first I have seen and enjoyed immensely. The second one, I haven't seen it yet. I need to just kind of buckle down and watch some movies one of these days. Regardless, the reason this figure is cool is, A, really good character design, leans into the Mezco aesthetic pretty well, but B, from the early solicits, it became apparent that this was going to be a new body. How new, we didn't know, and I'm still trying to piece it together myself, but it was a definite improvement and upgrade over the previous female figures that we've seen in the 112 line, which historically you may know. If you don't, I'm going to tell you right now. The Mezco female figures have tended to be a little less articulated, a little more focused on maintaining a silhouette than having the articulation. So they generally would have single-jointed elbows and knees, which on some characters is okay, but like for Catwoman and now with Spider-Gwen, that was going to be a huge problem. So if you want me to save you the remaining runtime of this video, that has been resolved, and in a fascinating way that has a lot of potential, I think, going forward. I think I can best describe this body as being a hybrid body. There is a mixture of traditional hard plastic joints, and then we have a rubber, or at least rubberized central body piece that covers what I presume to be a metal skeleton. Kind of like 89 Batman, but much, much better. Starting from the top, you have a conventional ball joint at the top. It's a metal ball joint, like the Fison figures generally use, but the neck itself is of that rubberized material. Can't really see down into the shirt. I'm not going to take the costume off, I'm sorry, but that's where the rubberized body is at. So essentially from the ball jointed shoulder in, this is still plastic, and you've got a full range of motion there on a traditional arm with a double jointed elbow that works fantastically. And then, of course, there is the usual ball socket wrist, as just about every Mezco figure has had thus far. From there, though, actually, let's go down here. So we've got traditional ankles with a ball joint there, and a hard plastic shin and double jointed knee, which again has a really good range of motion just in and of itself. But from the top of that knee joint up to the shoulder is this rubbery plastic body. Now, I don't know what's constituted of exactly, but it does feel like there is a kind of skeletal structure in there, probably metal like Batman's, where she has like hip joints, abdominal joint, and then, of course, the neck joint. The abdominal joint is just bonkers. I mean, they've had some really good torso articulation increases of late, but this is on an entirely different level, and I'm starting to see why they went this route. The hip joints, again, really, really good. Being obviously rubberized, there's nothing to get in the way, so having a well-designed suit and a full range of motion lets you do crazy stuff like this. The thing I like the most about it, though, is it's intuitive. The hips are a standard, it almost like a standard ball joint under there, kind of like the torso is. So unlike with 89 Batman, where you feel like you had to reset the joint if you pick the wrong one, this is a lot more traditional in its layout. And of course, being fully covered in a vinyl suit and having a more traditional style to it, and then having the standard double jointed elbows and knees, this feels like a lot more durable solution to the kind of Fison question that I don't think anybody's done so far. And I am super impressed with this body, if that's not clear already. The articulation and what I feel like is quality and should lean to durability is a huge win for this design. Again, the suit design for this figure has to help there too, because it's got just enough give to allow for some range without feeling like I'm going to tear or stress it in any spot, so it's really well laid out. This may not be something we want to see going forward on every figure in the line, but for articulated female figures, this is absolutely a must, I think. Moving over into accessories, let's start with her dimensional travel watch, which can go on either wrist, but I think it's supposed to go on her right wrist. And the presser actually listed as non-removable. It is removable. If you pop the hand off the wrist joint, you can obviously take it on and off. Just kind of adjust the sleeve before you do so. If you like, though, you could store her watch as well as her notebook, cell phone, and removed mask into her backpack. The top flap is, well, it's not really on a hinge. It's just kind of a flex joint, so you'll want to kind of finesse it a little bit, but you could store everything in the backpack. There is a cavity in there for it. Couldn't think of the word for a second there. And while it's a kind of light accessory count, it's nice to have something that can contain them all in one and keep everything together. Here's another shot of her mask, which is molded on the backside to be held in one of the grippy hands. It seemed like it worked pretty well in this left hand, but I think, honestly, it would probably fit in either one, depending how you want to orient it. Speaking of those hands, you have the expected fists, posing hands, holding hands, and also web shooting hands. She has two of these with the affixed web lines attached to them. It's nothing you haven't seen with our previous Spider-Man figures from the line, but it is obviously kind of an essential inclusion in any Spider-Verse figure, so I'm grateful to have them here as well. For optional head, she comes with what would I consider a practically obligatory unmasked Gwen Stacy head. Interestingly, this is based on the comic look and in turn more traditional look for Gwen Stacy than the younger shaved side of her head Spider-Verse look, but I actually do appreciate that. And though it would take some work, as in you're going to have to change out that ball joint completely or hollow out the head further, I suppose it would be feasible to put this on one of the Legends Gwen Stacy figures if you were so inclined. It's just not going to be an easy swap and not something you could switch back over. Here is a partial masked head, which I presume is so Gwen can unlock the screen lock on her phone without taking her mask completely off. Although I really think this is a pretty well realized effect. It's kind of a difficult look for a masked figure, especially in this style. I think it's helped out a lot by the really nice paint work, especially around the eyes. The differentiation between the whites of her eyes and the whites of her mask come across really well. That's actually true of all three of the masked heads, but it's definitely noticeable on this one in particular. Speaking of those, this is the other masked head variant other than the regular one, which has the slightly raised eye, sort of The Rock, sort of Spider-Sense tingling kind of look. And when I was talking about design choices as being a striking costume design, I think it's when you look at the mask on with the hood up that it really comes across extremely well. The color choices and just the layout is very aesthetically pleasing. And again, it doesn't hurt that these heads are extremely well done with that paintwork around the eyes. You can then, of course, take this head and using the display base, you can use the Spider-Sense effect piece, which is just a second armature that goes on the regular armature that attaches to the base. I would actually kind of like to maybe come up with something a little bit more portable for this. Maybe something I could clip onto the figure's waist and have it just behind her back like this. I may work on something like that later because I like the effect pieces, especially like this, where it gives her a little bit of dynamic appearance. And then we also have a dimensional portal piece, which has a kind of included and sort of integrated display standee for it so that it stays in place when you stand it up. Done in a nice translucent kind of pinkish purplish plastic. Well, I should say semi-translucent. It's not really translucent. And again, I assume this is based off of the look of the Spider-Verse comics more so than the look of the movie, which has that kind of hexagonal shape to it. But these kind of effects pieces, any kind of portal effect piece is really kind of underrated in my opinion. With so many dimensional hopping characters, you really can't have too many of this kind of piece to put behind them if you're integrating together a mixed display of some kind. Let's head over into comparison pictures because I think these might come in handy for this particular figure. Here is Gwen with my Spider-Verse collection, such as it is, with a mixture of Mezco figures like the 2099 and the Miles. Some Legends figures like the, how do we pronounce it? Is it Spider? Is it Spider? The mech Spidey, the manga Spidey. And then, of course, the Legends Spider-Ham. And a custom Spider-Man Noir on a Red Skull body. Wish I had more of those. And here she is with our two comic-based Mezco Spider-Man figures. The new, this year, classic Spider-Man on the left, and then the original comic book-based Spidey from several years ago, which I've said before is still probably my favorite of the Spider-Man figures that we've received from Mezco. As you're noticing right now, that means that this classic Spider-Man figure is basically the same height as Gwen. Is that a problem? I'm not sure. If you're talking about a teenage Peter Parker with a teenage Gwen Stacy, I think that's probably acceptable. Not 100% on that. That's going to be up to a more dedicated Spider-Man fan than me. But if you prefer a more adult-sized Peter, the stuff you say in reviews. If you prefer a more adult-sized Spider-Man, obviously the original comic figure is going to be the better fit. That's actually the same body as the original Miles figure, which is why I made this custom one based on the Homecoming body, which is a little bit shorter and a little more kid-sized. And honestly, I prefer this scale with Miles and Gwen to the factory Miles figure that I showed with the rest of the Spider-Verse figures a minute ago. But, you know, comparisons are good to have, so I figured I would include it as well, especially if you have a Legends Miles, which is closer in height to the one I've got here. And lastly, here she is with Supreme Knight Batman, who obviously she is neither taller nor bigger than, and there really is no multiverse where I would find that to be acceptable, so I think we are just fine for scale comparisons. So recommending this figure is considerably easier than to sticking with a single name for this character, because I think I've already called her by both names or three names at least twice during the course of this review. So yeah, this is an interesting figure. This is a very good figure, but this is also an interesting figure. It's nice to be reminded that innovation is not a bad thing. 89 Batman gets a bad rap because he tried to do too much, maybe too far beyond what he was capable of. And it's because I think he went too complicated. He tried to reinvent the wheel. Whereas this figure does not do that. This actually takes a much more, kind of in hindsight, kind of brilliant approach. It keeps it simple. The parts that work better in a solid PVC plastic or ABS plastic, they kept. The parts where you want some more flexibility or some more curve, they changed the rubberized plastic. As I said earlier, it kind of resolves the Fison problem, which does certain things really well and other things not well at all. And so not only am I excited, obviously, for what this may mean for future figures, that means that Spider-Gwen becomes an unexpectedly great figure because of what she can do. So if you want to get one for yourself, hop on the wait list at mezcotoys.com, because I'm sorry, but you guys know I'm always way behind on these things. Or hit up the usual suspects, Big Bad, Entertainment Earth. I don't know if she's in stock elsewhere, but I'm sure if you try, you will find one somewhere, even if it's eBay. And she is worth the effort to put in to find a figure. So thank you for watching the review. Thank you to Mezco Toys for helping me acquire one to review for you. And I will see you again in the next video.